Are you curious about what yoga looks like off the mat, or keen to hear how yogis all around the world live? This show will let you in on the secret that there's no such thing as a perfect yogi. Welcome to the Plant-Powered Yoga Podcast. Please welcome your host, yoga teacher, coffee lover, vegan, and known as the Plant-Powered Yogi, Jess Ivers. Hello yogis, Jess here. Welcome to the first episode of season 2 of the Plant-Powered Yoga Podcast. I am starting this season with a bit of a bang. Very excited to bring Holly Skodis from Yoga is Vegan onto the podcast, and really excited to share this chat with her. She's got a really cool story of how she found yoga, and as well as how she's made this amazing community of vegan yogis all around the world. So without further ado, we'll get stuck in. And Holly joined me all the way from Connecticut, and on the day that we spoke, it was actually the day of the US election. So there's a little bit of chatter around that, but apart from a little bit of the start, we talk yoga and veganism the whole way through. So enjoy. Alrighty, welcome to the latest episode of the Plant-Powered Yoga Podcast. I am today chatting with Holly Skodis, who is joining me from Connecticut in the USA. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be on.
Now, by the time this goes to air, we might know a result, but we're chatting on the day of the election being decided in the US, so it's probably nice now to have like a half-hour chat where we don't have to look at our phones and not be looking at the polls. Hopefully we'll have some good news at the end of this. But how are you feeling today?
Better than I was feeling last night.
Oh, that's good.
So yeah, we were talking about that before, but so my last night was it your morning? No, something like other way around.
Yeah.
But last night around 11:30, we all went to bed, and it was looking pretty Trumpy. So it's not right now, you know, as of now, as if we are speaking, Biden's got 264 electoral votes, which means he needs 6 more, and it's looking pretty positive in Nevada and possibly Pennsylvania, because I think what had happened was like they counted like the mail-in at first, or early voters, and then they stopped doing that, and then they went straight to the polls, and that's kind of why it got a little more red, and now it's shifting. But who knows what's going to happen? Even if they call it, it's going to be contested, I'm sure.
Yes.
So
hopefully
be stressful, but hopefully we'll see a switch.
Yeah, hopefully by the time this episode does come out, we will have a result that we are hoping for anyway. So, but enough about all of that, because that's some negative energy we don't need. We will talk a little bit about your yoga journey and how that came into your life. And so how long have you been practicing yoga for? How did you find it? Give us that in a nutshell.
Okay. Gosh, let's see. Well, my oldest daughter is now 17, so I will have been practicing yoga for 18 years now. Found it when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter through a DVD, or I think it was a DVD, maybe it was a VHS. I don't know. It was a long time ago. I want to think it was a DVD.
For those young listeners who don't know what a VHS is, that was what was before DVDs. It's very, very ancient.
Yeah. I kind of think it was a DVD, but whatever it was with Rainbow Mars, and it was a pregnancy yoga video, which I felt obligated to do. I can't say that I really enjoyed it. It was a little, for me at the time, it was a little too slow, and I wasn't particularly athletic, but I don't know. I did it anyway. I felt like it might help. And then I started kind of finding people who were into yoga once I had my daughter, and I started going to this Mommy and Me, and my first yoga teacher, Kate Thorson, was really incredible. And she had this she embodied what yoga like what a yoga teacher was supposed to look like. And she somehow had had a baby and she looked absolutely amazing. And I'm thinking, well, I gained like 35, 40 pounds. I'm not kind of feeling your bliss, but I'm going to follow you because you're clearly doing something that is working. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, we were even handstanding and I'm like a mommy and me with like young kids.
Wow.
Yeah, we had him kind of off, and there was a moment where we could go upside down, and I instantly fell in love. And then from there, I just started practicing more and more. And as my girls got older, that's where I started developing that. And then it's ebbed and flowed, and yeah, is what it is now.
I feel like you saying that you were handstanding in like mums and bubs class is such a nice way. Like, you've got all like little kids around you, how, when you're a kid and you do all these like weird things with your body and, you're happy to go upside down and not a care in the world. And when you get to be an adult, the thought of going upside down is like, nope, no, thank you. That's very frightening. It's like almost like finding a little bit of like your inner child in a way.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that I teach as well have a hard go of going upside down, or they're scared or they're nervous. I never did. I just kicked up at the wall, went up, and there it was. Like I couldn't hold it for very long, but there was no fear, probably because I had a trampoline as a kid and I was used to kind of goofing around that way. Yeah. So I think it was already comfortable in my body. But looking back at it, it was probably a little weird that that's what we were doing in A Mommy and Me.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
It was clearly the right path for me.
Yeah. Well, glad that you did. So you are now a yoga teacher as well. So you've racked up 800 plus hours of teaching, teacher training. So how did you find your way into teaching from there?
Yeah. So a friend of mine I was getting into yoga consistently once my girls were in school. And I had a friend of mine say, if you really want to up your practice, you need to practice at least 5 days a week. So I followed it and just did it. And I met a girlfriend of mine who we just kept going to the studio all the time. They're having a teacher training. We thought, let's do it. And this was probably, I was turning 40 when I did that, which was kind of crazy, but it was fun. It was kind of the first, 200-hour teacher training. It was okay. It was one of those trainings maybe that everyone feels this way, but after I did the 200 hours, I felt like I knew nothing. And I had a lot of learning to do. So I was the type of student who really got into the lineage of yoga and almost like the magic of yoga. I always loved these, what is that lagima? What is, are there secret powers of yogis? And I think I just tapped into that playfulness that I had as a kid, kind of wanting to bend a spoon with my mind. And I fell in love with the practice that way. And so I continued at that studio and ended up teaching. They asked me to teach once I did my 200 hours. So I taught there for a few years before I moved. And then that's when I shifted over to the East Coast. That was back in LA on the West Coast.
And I imagine there's lots of yoga teachers in LA.
Yes. Yeah, they were everywhere. I was lucky to have a job at a great studio. But it's kind of intimidating as well because, that was kind of when I have a great story. Actually, I don't know if you know who Dice and Bryony Smith were. They used to do yoga under the branding of Bryce Yoga, and they were teachers. They were handstandy. Dice is probably one of the biggest masters of the handstand, and I was always going to those classes and just really wanted to learn the press up, which I've kind of like once in a while it'll happen, but it doesn't happen very often for me. And I had to sub one of her classes, but prior to her class, she had this equinox video, and this was, still 7 years ago, before like everybody was just everywhere, all over YouTube, and her video had 1 million hits, and all of a sudden she became famous. And they asked me to sub her class, which sucked.
The thought of that gives me anxiety right now. If someone,
when you do, it's like your studio, and it's like, yeah, she's better than you, she's younger than you, she's adorable, but you're like our next skilled person at this. So you take the class for the day. And so I had people, show up in this room, realize it was me, and walk out, which, they will do in Los Angeles. But it was a great experience because I feel like if I can handle that, I can do anything.
Yeah. I was like,
especially as a new teacher.
Yeah. What an opportunity to embrace, in a way, like as frightening and scary as that probably was. How cool as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was fun. I had a great experience in LA, just enjoying like the physical part of yoga. And then once I moved over to the East Coast, that's when I met my teacher, Dharma Mitra, and started doing my 500-hour, my 800-hour teacher trainings. And that's just where the practice shifted from being something that was physical and learning about the spiritual to experiencing it from a completely different angle and integrating the diet. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey, and
Awesome.
it's been fun. Yeah,
18 years and still going strong.
Yeah.
So you just touched on then about finding the diet aspect, I guess, of that, and so yoga, veganism. I feel like this is something we could talk about for the next like 3 hours. But how did you find that connection between those two things?
So it's also a longer story, but so back when I was doing my 200-hour teacher training, it was around the same time that I was starting to suffer some health issues. I had terrible anxiety. I had insomnia to the point where they were medicating me. At the worst point, I couldn't sleep for 3 straight days. It had gotten really dark and weird. And I had done some blood work and found that all of a sudden my blood pressure was going up and my cholesterol was going up. I was showing signs. It was in that yellow zone of you don't need to be medicated yet, but you're going to be soon unless you do something. And I had, my father, I talk about it on my podcast, from time to time. I grew up in a family that was very abusive. And, both my parents were alcoholics, and my dad to the point that he essentially drank himself into a coma and got a liver transplant, then continued to smoke, got lung cancer, and died at a young age. So I watched the consequences of just what you take in through food, through drugs, through alcohol, through, what kind of emotional setting you're living in your household, how you treat other people, how all of that affects your longevity. And so we had gone through that. And then my husband's mom had also died of pancreatic cancer. So we watched like 2 really rotten deaths. My dad's death between the liver transplant and the coma, and the cancer took about 4 years. So it was a very sad time. And so when I got those blood results, and I'd had an aunt as well who had had a heart attack at 48. And I knew my grandfather apparently had died at 55 of a heart attack. I knew I had to take these things seriously because at the very least, as a new mom, I probably had some crappy genes. So I started watching Forks Over Knives. I'd read the China study, and that's kind of where that seed got planted as far as a whole food plant-based diet is where I could make and reverse some of those changes. So when I did the 200-hour teacher training, I'd been doing a lot of homework towards that, but I was still scared to make that switch. It seemed so foreign and weird. I didn't know what to cook. I was just, it was too much. So I decided to be vegetarian because I had read in, Autobiography of a Yogi. I always get that wrong, by Paramahansa Yogananda.
Yes.
Talked about yogis being vegetarian. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do my 200-hour teacher training and commit to being vegetarian during that duration. And that's kind of where it started. And then I went towards that plant-based, and about 6 months after that vegetarian switch, I was whole food plant-based about 95% of the time. And sometimes I felt like I was vegan, and sometimes I got off a little bit. And I just really didn't understand what that concept meant. And by the time I got to Dharma Mitra, I knew I had wanted to be vegan. And his training requires that you're vegan for the duration of the
Wow.
training. That is a prerequisite. So
Love that.
yeah, what I didn't realize was you also had to be on a very specific diet for about 6 months, which was incredible, amazing experience. So it was why I chose Dharma Mitra as my teacher, because I knew he was right, and I needed to make a commitment to something higher in my teacher training to get there. And so that's where that journey started. And then it just kept going,
Which
going.
is a way cooler story, I feel like, than a lot of vegans have. Just be like, oh, I just kind of woke up one day and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. No, that's awesome, and I love that. That's been such an important part of incorporating yoga, your diet, and your philosophy of life into all of that.
Yeah, and if you take, like, I take being a yoga teacher very seriously. I
Yeah.
mean, not that my classes are always so serious, but that I think when you step into the seat of a teacher, like, if you're going to be that teacher, you need to embody that that what you're trying to really project and to give to others. And I now know through experience that the diet is very geared towards opening and shifting your consciousness. And that's kind of why I started with Yoga is Vegan. It came after I did a vegan training. But I really started understanding this concept that at its essence, the idea of getting to this higher consciousness is, and veganism is an expression of that. Because you really can't have one without the other. It doesn't mean you can't practice yoga and not be, you don't have to be vegan to practice yoga. Clearly, I wasn't.
Yeah.
But I think as we develop and grow as humans and teachers and raise our consciousness, that ultimately a decision of compassion can be expressed through your choices, whether they're what they take into your mouth, what you wear on your back, the way that you treat others. I think they're all interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea as well, that because I think as well sometimes it can get lost in yoga that everything you do in it has to be perfect, and it's that whole thing is it's a practice. And so if you start out practicing yoga and you're not vegan, or you have different views or opinions or things, that that's okay, because it's a lifelong practice and a lifelong experience that these things will adapt, hopefully, as you keep going. I guess that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I think everybody's path is different. And I don't think there's one specific prescription for yoga or for what the diet looks like, or like it's all for everybody to experience. And that's kind of been my goal, is to embrace all, and through embracing and highlighting all, that's how we can collectively shine and inspire others. It's a rough idea.
Yeah, in a nutshell. Now, you have your blog and podcast, Yoga is Vegan. How did that come about, and how has it thrived since then?
Well, it's going. It's going. It's going. It came about after I did a training called oh gosh, what is it called? Victoria Moran has a Main Street Vegan program. And Victoria Moran, I don't know if you know who she is, but she's
No,
a
I
yogi.
don't.
She's in her 70s. She's put together this international program. It essentially teaches you how to be vegan and why to be vegan. And then it helps you kind of channel that into whatever profession you're in. It's like, how can you then take your own skill set and do something to help inspire others to go vegan? And I adore her, and I'm really close with her. But I had gone through her program about a year after I did my 500-hour teacher training with Dharma Mitra, and I was doing a lot of meditation. as part of my homework. And then I've kind of kept that since then. So I meditate quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting in my bedroom and I had my laptop there, and I needed to meditate before I was doing whatever it was. And I wasn't even quite sure what I was doing at the time. So I meditated. As I was meditating, all of a sudden, you get, sometimes you just hear these kind of things, voices come into your mind. And it was yogaisvegan.com. I was like, okay. So I stopped the meditation. I'm like, what? It's like, because I was trying, I was obviously on my mind, like, how am I going to connect yoga and veganism? What am I going to do with this?
Mm.
And yogaisvegan.com just came into my head. I was like, yoga is vegan. I'm like, okay, well, let's see if there is that .com, because it's hard to get a .com.
Oh yeah, super hard.
And there it was. Nobody had bought it. And so I just stopped what I was doing and I bought it. I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I bought it.
Amazing.
My husband was like, what? Are you sure? I was like, no, this is the name. Trust me. It's right. And so I just bought up everything that had to do with yoga is vegan. And I'm like, well, I'll worry about what that means later. And it started as a blog first because, well, first of all, I wasn't going to put all this content together. I've always thought it was about the collective and not just about me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would prefer to highlight other people than myself and be like, hey, look what I'm doing. Look how it's just not me. It needs to be me a little bit more, I think, on social media, but it's just not really the way that I'm wired. But I love to post about other people and allow them to shine. And so that was just kind of the first model. It was all blogs at first and social media with the post. And I was meeting all these people, and I wanted it to be global because I wasn't too happy about living in Connecticut and I didn't like my friends here. And I was like, well, I'll just find friends everywhere else, which I have, which is great.
How good is that? I know people love to rag on social media about, that you're meeting all these strangers on the internet, but it's like, how cool you can have all these amazing connections with people anywhere in the world.
I've met some really good friends just through this project because we all have the same values. Yeah. And that's really hard to get sometimes. So I started with the blog, and that went on for about a year. And a friend of mine, who wasn't a friend of mine at the time, Anna Ferguson, reached out. She was running Cincy Veg Fest. She was following Yoga is Vegan. I had featured her once. She said, do you want to come out and speak? I was like, oh gosh, wow.
Okay.
Never done that before. I'm scared, but I know I have to say yes. And so I said yes, and I had been kind of like, part of the problem I had with the blog was that I felt like I could really get these more information, connect to people better through a podcast. And my husband was doing a podcast at the time. So of course he'd bought all this equipment in the way that he does, right? He gets into it. It's like, he's got like 6 microphones. He's doing all this stuff. I think he actually only did 8 episodes.
Look, I'll admit that, I probably didn't go as hard with the 6 microphones, but when I was like, I'm going to start a podcast, I was like, I went and bought like a little sound booth and, some foam and things. And my parents were like, what do you need all this for? I was like, I'm starting a podcast and it's going to be a very serious business. Okay. And then realized that probably went a bit too far, but
That's good. See,
dedication.
I need to do that. But it's all good. Yeah. So anyway, so I started, I was like, okay, well, my first episode will just be my kind of working out my speech. And it was great. Good experience to just kind of start to understand, like, what is this all about? And, it was essentially the actual speech ended up bringing everybody else's stories into the speech. But I started going, okay, we'll do the podcast. And then I had that first episode and I didn't release it. And then I ended up meeting some people when I went to Cincy Veg Fest. And I said, can I interview you? And so I interviewed Will Tuttle. Like, he just came straight on and did it. I couldn't believe it. And a couple other people, and I had a few episodes. I was like, okay, I'll release it. And so I just kept going, small steps.
Yeah.
And just going, okay, the people who need to find it will find it. I didn't push so hard or worry so much about, like, well, is it going to be the most popular? Or I just kept pushing ahead. And so now I'm on like episode, I think it's around 78. I decided not to release one this week because of the election.
Yeah.
And I was getting a little burnout too. I needed a little break as well. I think sometimes, you just have to reevaluate and go, okay, like what is I want to make sure there's always quality. And sometimes I think we can set these standards for ourselves. It's like, oh, I have a deadline. And then you have to think, well, who made up that deadline? You made up that deadline. Okay, maybe you could relax a little if you're feeling burnt out right now. So, it's been going. I've been blown away as to some of the people that I've been able to talk to. Like that's blown my
You've had some
mind.
amazing guests on there.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, there's also people who say no or just don't respond, and you get to see. I think it's kind of funny. I had reached out to see if Yoga Girl would come on.
Oh yes.
She won't. What she might. I don't know.
I'll cross her off
this.
my list then. No.
Yeah, I got this. Well, let me know if you get her. No, I decided not to pursue it because, and it wasn't her; it was her people, and it was pretty much, well, we're just choosing to see what we want, what we're going to do. What's your audience like? And I thought, you know what? I'm looking for people who want to share why yoga is vegan. And if it's about complete numbers, it's not the right guest.
Yeah, that's right.
She may have had a different attitude, but that was like her people. So every once in a while you get blocked with something like that. And I just went, I'm not going to respond to that.
Yeah.
Just because. So it's
well, I
been
feel like
kind
when you start getting to people's people, then that's probably a sign of probably not, well, not.
No, I mean, I've had some really, that's how I got like Sean Korn, and that worked out just fine. Or Boho Beautiful. That was another one that like they were amazing. So
yeah.
I don't know, whatever happened, but it does happen sometimes, and you can get caught up and go, well, what if I'm not big enough? What if I'm not good enough? You could do the same thing with yoga. And I'm like, what's the goal here? Yeah. The goal is to get this message out. So I'm just going to continue to stick along that message and not worry. It's like not worrying about the fruits of your labor. That's what Dharma Mitra says. Like you just do your good work and don't worry about where it lands. Just do the good work. So that's what I've been trying to do.
That's really nice. I've probably been trying to do a little bit more of that this year as well. I think if I look back to my life like a year ago of just like some of the things that I was doing and things I was working on, and they maybe hadn't gone as well as I'd hoped, and that was automatically, my mind was like, oh, it's a failure, like this is so embarrassing, I'm gonna have to like crawl into a hole because I don't want anyone to know that the project I worked on was a failure, what I considered a failure, and it wasn't. Right. But I can get so caught up in that no one's going to listen to this, and it's like, you know what, if one person listens to it, then amazing, that's one person. Well,
and
maybe it's more than that, that's incredible.
That's what's been really nice, is because some of my bigger guests who come on, I've said, if it's just one person that we make a difference, this is worth my while.
Yeah,
it's like that's the right attitude, but it is so easy to get caught up otherwise and allow like that inner voice to tell you like you're not good enough, but it's been going, it's been going well.
Yeah, absolutely. 78 episodes, that's no, that's definitely going.
Finding it and I don't know about you, but you've seen like dips with the pandemic a little bit, and like you watch and it kind of ebbs and it flows a little bit. And trying to always figure out, what that best release date is, which can get tricky. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. and like, it can be that thing where you get so caught up in thinking about that you're just like, you know what, like my other, life is social media marketing, and there's always this big thing about what's the right time to post on social media, and you're like, you know what,
right.
Sometimes like there is no right science behind it, because if it's a good piece of content, or same with the podcast, if it's a great video or great audio thing, something to listen to, then people will find it and share it. And it doesn't matter if you posted it at 5:00 on a Thursday afternoon, when right. They tell you that that's when you should post it. Well, I'm glad to hear it's all been going well. Yeah, you've had some amazing guests on there, so you should be very proud. I'm sure you are of it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I am. It's funny when you do get certain people, or yeah, it's neat. It's like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? Or I had a friend of mine reach out who has her podcast as well. She goes, "How did you get him on?" I said, "You've got to email him at like early in the morning. That's when he'll respond." Like it's just like this weird fluke that I figured out. She's like, "He
Yeah.
responded." I said, "There you go." Apparently he's an early
He's an early bird.
he's paying attention early in the morning. Otherwise he'll miss it. Or,
But isn't that
I don't
also
know.
just the thing of, like, everyone's on this weird and wonderful journey, and sometimes your paths will cross and sometimes they won't, and it's kind of just like everything's going in its own way, and not to see that as a failure, or not to see that as a dead end if something doesn't work out, or just
Right.
everything's in this nice flow.
Exactly. And not to take yourself too seriously. It's like, I can't remember what I can't remember who said this, but I was listening. What was he listening to? I don't know what it was, but there's this idea of like your world, right? You think what you're doing is so important. Oh, I know. It was the Matthew McConaughey interview on Ritual, and he was
Oh yeah.
talking about that. And it was this idea of like, now just look back, at like Google Maps, and go back and realize that you're just this tiny little speck, and it's really not that important. And
Yeah.
then, your actions are important, but it is an interesting perspective, is to not just get all caught up
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
worry so much about all of
Yeah.
that.
It's like when you said before about you had a bit of a break this week from the election, and also because you were just like, I just need a break. That idea of that rest is an idea of like radical sort of like activism in a way, because you're not embracing, or you're not kind of falling into that idea of, oh, I just have to get this done, because otherwise if I don't, like this, this project is so important that if I don't publish it right now, the world will fall apart. And it's like, you know what, it's this little thing, and what happens if you don't? Nothing bad is going to happen, like everything's going
Exactly.
to be okay. Some
Yeah.
perspective check.
Exactly. Plus, my oldest is maybe her last year at home. Like, she's a senior
Oh,
in high school. So, you want to be present.
exactly. Without going on and on and on about all of that too much, because there's 78 episodes for people to listen to, which I'll put all the link to your podcast in the show notes of this. There was a quote on your website that you said that together we can lead by example, when you're talking about yoga, veganism, and I guess in terms of that, like, yes, we are these little specks, but also you touched on that our actions, no matter how small, they can start to, I guess, reverberate around, and we can seem so insignificant, but these little things can, it might take some time, but can start to spread out. And that idea of everyone slowly making a change to veganism, or to this state of higher being, I guess that's kind of a lot of what you're about.
Yeah. Just leading by example.
Yeah.
And, I find that I influence probably my daughter's friends a lot. And I think that's really neat,
Yeah.
because, we've turned, a couple of them vegan, and
Very
they'll,
cool.
yeah, but it wasn't, it wasn't because we told them they had to. It's just kind of like paying attention and planting seeds, and,
Yeah.
trying to fix as much as you can. And hopefully people go, oh, wow, why is she not suffering during this? Or why,
Mm,
I think there's a lot of potential there, but that
yeah.
everybody is that inspiration for
Yeah.
others. Everybody.
Love that. Now, one last question before we finish up is what I like to ask other yoga teachers is, what is some advice you can maybe offer to someone who might be considering maybe becoming a teacher, or even considering going vegan, or is going down this path of, their path to enlightenment in a way? What's your advice for them?
Oh gosh. Well,
Tough one to finish, I know.
yeah. I mean, I think for yoga teachers, um, my advice is to not get caught up trying to be someone else. You know, like you can be inspired by others, but I think part of what makes a good teacher is someone who has the confidence to express, like, to be their expression of their self, and to be okay with whatever that expression is, to know your students will come, and that there's a lot of work, and new teachers especially, it's so scary sometimes to teach, and you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't, what if I screw something up, or I forget a name, or I mean, okay. People, you can always just say do this, and get into the, and that's what I learned from Dharma, like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And to just share your practice, and also if you're a teacher, have your own practice. Don't be a teacher who only does other people's classes. That's where you're going to learn the most, and then that is what you can teach to other people. And as far as veganism, I say just start doing something, and don't look at it as you have to be perfect, right? It's that balance between staying like steadfast and committing to doing something, because I think when we shouldn't go that easy on ourselves. I think sometimes we let ourselves off the hook because we will fall into that word of moderation, and then that just kind of turns into I think just laziness. And I mean laziness in a sense of getting out of, like, sticking to something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to, if being vegan is something that you want to try, then give it a full try. And if you're someone who needs to plan ahead, think about a few days ahead of time, and make sure you have food in your house, and make sure you eat enough calories, because I think that's something that people run into problems with. But be patient too, because you could be somebody who's been eating really crappy food for a long time, and if you try to go all in with vegetables and beans and gassy foods, your microbiome, your stomach, bacteria that live in there, they might rebel a little bit. So have a little patience, and do it for something more than yourself, right? So if it's for animals, then do it for the animals. Like, do it for a cause greater than you. And if something happens and you have a holiday, and all of a sudden your grandmother's going to give you a cookie with butter in it, and you're at odds, and you eat this cookie that has butter in it, just continue on being vegan the next day. Don't think because you had one mess up, you screwed it all up. And don't ask anybody on the internet if that was a bad thing to do on a vegan channel, because they will be mean to you. So just don't go there. But just
yeah, I've seen that in a few vegan groups, and it's like, it's okay.
Yeah, no. Just know it's okay, and just stick to something and try it for a little while. And know, just like anything, that if you're doing something important, it usually takes effort. And if it's something that's going to make you feel good about yourself and to be proud of, that it's not always going to be easy. And that's okay. And just like a practice with yoga, if something goes wrong, just, say, okay, that was a great learning point. Now make a different choice the next time.
Yeah.
I think
love all of that. That is some great advice. I especially love if it's important to you, like it'll mean something, and it'll keep going. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure chatting. Thank you.
Yeah,
and I hope that again, by the time that we hop off the phone, we'll have some good news about other thing that's going on.
We'll see. It's all going to work out the way it needs to.
And I'll put all the links to where people can find you, your website and your blog, but you've got your Instagram handle, which is just @yogaisvegan.
Yep. Everything is yoga is vegan.
If you literally
Pretty
type
simple.
yoga and vegan into Google, like Holly's website is the first thing that come up. So it's great.
That's kind of amazing.
It's pretty good. I love that it's like epiphany came to you while you're meditating as well. It's just like, just like the universe was telling you something. It's like, this is, yeah.
Yeah, everything is at yoga is vegan. It's really simple.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for making the world a better place with everything that you do.
Well, you too. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that chat with Holly as much as I did. It was great to connect with another yogi on the other side of the world, especially at the moment when getting around is a little limited. You can find Holly by searching at Yoga is Vegan on Instagram, and I'll pop all the links to her website, her podcast, and whatnot in the show notes below. Next week's episode will also be covering a bit of veganism when I talk a little bit about ahimsa and what that means from a bit of a yoga philosophy angle, and it'll be something that might be touched on a little later in this series as well. So looking forward to sharing that with you next week. Until then, stay safe and take care. I'd also like to acknowledge that this podcast was recorded on Tharawal land of the Yuin Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the people, the traditional custodians of the land on where I work and live. Yoga.com or visit the show notes below. I'd love it if you could rate, review, or even share this podcast with a friend. Thanks so much for helping create a kinder world, and see you next time.